I've added the start of the markup for the new benefit selector component. We saw that when the component is initialized, it starts an asynchronous operation to get the benefits. OnInitialized async is a lifecycle method. It is fired when the component has finished initializing in this case. As long as this operation isn't done, the benefits property will be null. We have to take that in account when writing the markup. So when the load operation is still underway, we just render a loading text, just like in employee overview. As soon as it completes, we render a table. In the for each statement, we just render one column for now, the description of the benefit. Now let's see what we got. Because everything runs locally, the loading is so fast that the loading indicator can't be seen. But the benefit descriptions are there. I now put a breakpoint in the onInitialized async method and run the application. As soon as I click the icon, the method fires. When I collapse the benefit component and make it reappear, onInitialized async fires again. So the benefits are requested from the API every time we make the component appear. Now why is that? In the parent component, the employee row, the component only exists if showBenefits is true. When showBenefits goes from true to false, the component instance is destroyed. When we go to true again, a completely new instance is created and thus onInitialized async is called again. If you don't want that for your application, instead of making the instance go away, you could just hide it. One way is to use CSS and set display none on the benefit selector. Now speaking of lifetime, the dispose pattern is also supported by components. Should you use unmanaged resources in your component? Dispose is automatically called when a component is destroyed. If you write code in the component directly, instead of using the code behind class, you can implement the interface by using the implements directive. You then have to write the dispose method in the code block. Of all lifecycle methods, you will probably use onInitialize the most, but there are a few more. OnParameterSetAsync, or its synchronous version, will fire each time a component receives new parameter values from its parent. And by the time it fires, it has already assigned the new values to the component's properties. You can use this one, for example, to set a private field, the value of which is dependent on the incoming properties. Use setParameters when you want to do something before the parameters are assigned to the properties. You can inspect the incoming parameters by using the object you get passed in. Important to know is that assigning the incoming parameters to the properties of the component is done by the base implementation. So if you omit the base call, that isn't done anymore. When onAfterRenderAsync or onAfterRender fires, the component has completely re-rendered. It also fires on the very first render. In that case, the incoming boolean is true. Write code for this one if you want to do something with the rendered elements, such as using a JavaScript library that uses them. There's also a method to override which is not really part of the lifecycle. ShouldRender. When you return false from that, you can prevent the component from re-rendering. Blazor will ignore this method when the component is initially rendered. We'll see a potential problem with the diff mechanism in combination with collections in the next clip.